At the moment, I have a 12-year-old thoroughbred in who I'm retraining to be a para-dressage horse for a lady who cannot use the legs, she cannot walk. All right, I suddenly was this riding instructress that I always said I wanted to be. But I suddenly realised I actually didn't want that.
Can we speak horse as a human?
No.
And why not, do you think, Melanie?
Because a horse is a horse and a human is a human. The students never got hands-on and dirty. They never got involved. They never got to know the horses and the ponies on a one-to-one level.
How adaptable are they when it comes to retraining, and how long does it take to give them a new job and say, no, you're not a racehorse, this is now what you might like to do?
Can we speak horse? Are we able to become part of the herd? A concept that is questioned, attempted and discussed across the equestrian world. Well, Melanie S. Watson, founder of Instinctive Horse Training, believes we can't. She says we can never be recognised as their leader because we are human, not horse. Melanie trains on an emotional level. She builds trust and understanding so that every horse feels secure. But how do we make our horses feel safe in the arena, in the field, in the sand school, in the stable, if we can't speak their language? Let's jump into this episode and begin with Melanie's unlikely journey with horses and hear why the equestrian industry needs to change now.
Melanie, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Oh, thank you. I've really looked forward to this evening.
Well, Melanie, start by taking us back to your childhood in East Africa and tell us how that influenced and inspired your journey with animals and horses.
Yes, I mean, it did actually have a very profound effect. In a sad way, I've never had a particularly cohesive relationship with my mum. My sister was extraordinarily talented at ballet from a very, very young age. And I never was. And I had to do ballet. And then the whole family had to sing. So we're always in church singing. And I love singing and I still sing. But being pushed in a direction that I really didn't want to go and never meeting the standard or the criteria because I just literally couldn't. But my whole childhood out in East Africa, my mother, who was a nurse in Liverpool, my father had come over on leave and he had malaria. She was working in the Liverpool Hospital of Tropical Diseases. She met him. They fell in love. Like within 12 weeks, they'd married. And she got whisked out to East Africa. And because what my father was doing, he was part of conservation, the early times of conservation. So like people like David Leakey and all these amazing people right back before there was ever conservation per se. And all under the guidance of Jomo Kenyatta, who was the president of Kenya then, who was very forward thinking. And, you know, she got whisked out to the bush and had her first, I'm the youngest, but had my sister in Malawi where there was nothing and she had to get water from the river and boil it and everything, you know, so it was like a hard thing. Now, she was a qualified midwife, so she was immediately helping to nurse and look after the locals. And it was a very strange time for her as well because she witnessed such cruelty to animals and she couldn't cope with it. And so if they found orphan cubs or orphan warthogs or orphan anything, they would just kill them. And mum would like, no, 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 no. And she would rear them. And so my childhood, by the time I got involved in it all, got born, we always had something in our back garden. We always had something. And how conservation was then going, the Kenya National Parks was starting to happen. All this conservation stuff was started to do the national parks. But equally, because poaching was so rife, I know it's still so rife. In those days, it was totally uncontrolled, completely uncontrolled. We were always rearing something. And I can vividly remember Mum going into Nairobi one day and that the children of the servants, because you have this big house full of all their family. If you have a servant, you have all their family. You have to look after everybody, the grandparents, everybody is under the same roof. And my mum was like so in charge of their welfare and their health. And they were torturing this fruit bat. And I was desperately upset about this fruit bat. And I remember going in and taking this fruit bat off them and putting it on my lap. And I was in the sitting room, and this fruit bat was covered in lice and fleas and everything else. And I didn't care. And all its wings were ripped. And they were just using it as entertainment. And of course, Mum came back from her shopping in Nairobi to find me in her best sitting room with this flea-ridden bat on my lap with me in floods of tears. And of course, that was the next thing. She actually stitched up its wings and we had it in a cage. And then one day it flew away. And so we had dogs and we had, stuff, and Mum fed dogs, street dogs. And so soon she became the Mem Sahib, who people would just arrive with some young animal of some description, and Mum would nurture it and rear it. And I was always really involved in all of that. I was just always involved with all of that. My sister, she was doing her ballet and things. She didn't quite really like getting dirty. And I didn't. I was in there. And so that's kind of how it started, really. This innate nurturing vulnerable animals. And I guess I was always going to work with animals, regardless of the fact that I'd moved into horses. And that's how East Africa affected me, was the fact that, and when we came to the UK, we always were hand rearing some kitten, or just, people would just kind of bring blackbirds with a broken wing. And we always were doing something. And I was always very likely to work with animals. So, and that's kind of how the animals thing started. The fact that horses started, when we did come back to the UK, when they brought in Africanization in 1969, 1970, we came back to the UK to live. So I had my entire childhood out there. I was still having to, we joined the local church. And so I was always in the choir. And my sister was always dancing, but I really couldn't dance. They had given up on me as ballet. But my new best friend went pony riding on a Sunday morning. And I wasn't allowed to go pony riding on a Sunday morning because I had to go and sing in church. And the more you're told you can't do something, the more you kind of want to do it. And so I was given the odd riding lesson as a birthday present or as a whatever. And I have a vivid memory of the Wellgrove Riding Centre, which I think was a terrible place now when I look back at it in my mind's eye. It was just a riding school. And I rode a pony called Flash. And Flash didn't flash. What Flash used to do, if you went out on a ride, you'd be plodding along the road. I'd be exhausted, kind of kicking away, trying to keep up with everything. And all Flash did was put his head down and eat.
Oh, no.
I remember spending the most of my days halfway down his neck with my feet up behind me, sliding down his neck. And they would always tell me, stop him, stop it. I didn't know how to stop him. And he just did it anyway. He just ignored me completely. And I always remember them saying, hit him, kick him, pull him in the mouth. And I was even aware at that age that he had a metal bit in his mouth. I didn't want to do what they did. So I would end up sliding off, going alongside him, and I'd kind of let him graze on the way home. I was just a kid. But I guess I already sort of had this innate right from wrong, that I just couldn't brutalize this pony to force him to let me ride him. So that was quite impactful. We then ended up moving to Edinburgh. A friend of mine had a pony, so of course I ended up hanging around the stables, being the annoying kid, do anything to have a 10-minute ride. And for my birthday, I was treated to a lesson at the Fulmer School of Equitation in Edinburgh. And this lesson was in an indoor school. Ooh. And the instructor wore all the gear. She had a shirt, a tie, a jacket, a hairnet, a hat, white joppers, boots. I wanted to be her. And basically, the ponies did what they wanted because she'd say, all right, prepare to trot, and trot. The ponies would trot anyway. And then you kind of all stacked up at the end, and then you did your own thing all the way around. And it just used to bugger off with you all the way back till it got to the back of the queue and it would stop dead. It was so impressionable. And this beautifully turned out woman in the middle of the Fulmer School of Equitation, I just wanted to be her. That was the start of my journey. I wanted to be a riding instructor. We then eventually moved down to England. We came to Yorkshire, which is where I still am. Although I left and worked abroad for a lot of years, I've come home and I'm still in East Yorkshire. I had a kind of a weird thing happen, and that is that in East Africa, they basically kind of don't want children. They want you to be seen and not heard. So you kind of go to school a lot. And the colonial thing is, the adults are doing whatever it is they're doing and the kids are away. We had school on Saturdays and everything. But I was actually 2 years in advance of my age group educationally when we came back from Africa. And everyone would say Africa is backward, but it wasn't. So they wouldn't put me on 2 years here in the UK. They put me on a year. And that came back to bite me insofar as when I'd done my O-levels, as it was in those days, I couldn't leave school because I was only 15 and you had to be 16. We didn't have vocational things in those days. You left school at 16 and you went to work, or you stayed and you did A-levels, and that was it. You went and did an apprenticeship with some shipyard or something. We didn't have all these wonderful, horse management, behaviour and everything, animal, all the stuff that the kids have got now. We didn't have any of that. So I kind of had to do A-levels because I wanted to gain my BHSAI, which is the British Horse Society Assistant Instructor, and to do your horse management things, so stages 1, 2, 3, and you can go 4 and you can go 5, you can go to any level you want. But the basic one in those days was a 2-day exam to do your BHSAI and to gain your stages to level 3. And you had to be 17 and a half, which timed in perfectly for me to do A-levels, even though I didn't want to do A-levels. And I left school, I think, on the Thursday, and I went to Snainton Riding Centre on the Sunday.
No.
I think that's the only rest I ever had. I had a 3 days rest because I've never stopped since. So I was 17 and a half and I had this, this opportunity. I was a working pupil. You could be a student, but I didn't come from a moneyed family. I couldn't afford, the parents couldn't afford that. So I worked for my training, which was actually a much better way to go. The students never got hands-on and dirty. They never got in. They never got to know the horses and the ponies on a one-to-one level because they were, coming in later on. We'd already been out, mucking out, feeding, turning out, bringing in, rugging, doing our stuff, and the students would arrive later. I was a working pupil under the guidance of a guy called Alec Lyle, who was a wonderful bloke. He was a fellow of the British Horse Society, but he was very intuitive, very strict. We were all scared of him in the first place. But he, in fact, turned out to be a really important mentor for me. And because I didn't come from a horsey background, I had a disadvantage because I didn't know what turn on the forehand was. I didn't know anything. I kind of just knew how to sit to a canter and walk and trot and serpentine. What on earth is a serpentine? It's just like, whoa. If it stops, it stops. And if
a friend said to me the other day, what on earth is a serpentine? And this was a non-horsey friend. And I said, but I can tell you exactly what it is. Don't ask me where it comes from. I'm imagining it's something to do with a snake, but it's a shape in this. And I said, she went, how on earth do you know that? I said, dressage is the only, and riding schools and riding lessons is the only way I know that word. Very unusual, but would be great in a pub quiz, wouldn't it? That
I can remember, this is digressing completely, but I can remember the generation game. It was Bruce Forsyth, and they got these unfortunate families to compete against each other and do tasks. One of the tasks, they had these like model horse, and there was 4 sets of families, and you had to put a bridle together and put it on this horse, because I knew how to do that. And they had it behind the ears, and they had the rein coming out somewhere else because they had no idea how to. And it was just a whole load of leather that they had to put on a horse's head. And I'll never forget that. That I knew how.
That is a hard task, isn't it? Yeah, really hard task for mainstream telly.
Oh, very
but the equestrian world it's a whole nother language, isn't it? It's a whole new world for those trying to step in to, and try and get to grips with all of the different aspects of, looking after horses and tack and riding and groundwork and horse care.
I've just got an apprentice through to Gateway after 18 months who didn't come from a horsey background at all. Just even the points of a saddle, there's a skirt. And she has to learn all the, never mind skeletal or muscle and everything else. Yes, and it's all a complete, snaffle and a martingale and frog. I mean, why is a frog a frog?
We could unpick all the terminology now, couldn't we? Why on earth is a frog a frog?
Called it a frog. So bless her, we've been obviously over the last 18 months with her just bringing all the terminology into everything. Anyway, digressing from all of that, I ended up obviously doing my AI. I passed my AI. It was when it was first moved into a two-day course, a 2-day exam rather, and did my BHS stages. The one thing that I did find while I was doing all of this is that I found the riding really hard because I didn't have a competition base. I really struggled with the riding, but I did not struggle with the care and the noticing the little things, the things that make the difference when a horse is slightly off or slightly odd, or I always disliked something, so I changed something maybe in it. And that was the one thing that Alec Lyle picked up on. And I'll never forget him turning around to me and saying, now, out of the batch of students I've got now, Melanie, I would employ you because you desperately care for the horses, not for the result of the exam. I was terrified of the exam. I'd have been quite happy not to have done the exam and just carried on doing my thing. So I think it was that intuitive side. Again, that's from nurture, isn't it? That's from bothering to look, bothering to make sure that the horse emotionally is in a good place, the dog or the cat or the warthog. So kind of that side was always going to be my strength. Because I struggled with the riding and realised that I suddenly was this riding instructress that I always said I wanted to be. But I suddenly realised I actually didn't want that. I didn't actually want to stand in the middle of a school with just loads of kids coming. I just didn't want to be, all right? There was more. There was more to learn, and I felt that I personally had to gain more. And so I secured a job in Vienna, in a dressage yard outside Vienna. And the opportunity there was a tough job. It wasn't a nice job. It was hard. But you were trained by 2 riders from the Spanish riding school. So classical equitation. And so you looked after your 6 horses and their clients and their customers, and we're all English girls out there. Some of it was cohesive, some of it wasn't cohesive. It's hard when you throw a load of girls together. There was very much a hierarchy, and of course I was at the very bottom of the heap. It wasn't a happy time for me, but I stuck it out for a very long time because I was gaining so much. My riding and becoming intuitive riding. So rather than just becoming a much more skilled rider and being able to leave the British Horse Society, which was much more sit up, look pretty. You could actually be fairly ineffective. I don't know what it's like now, but in those days, you could be completely ineffective so long as you were sat in a correct position and you were this, that, and the other. And the horse was merely a tool to take you down that. And the Spanish riding school guys, it was very much about attention to detail. It was about fluency, calmness, cadence, flexion, suppleness, balance. And we're meeting those horses are in the middle, and you can't move on to anything, not even a leg yield, until you've got the horse in a lovely forward, soft, easy way, accepting the basic aids. So it was really good. And I looked after 6 horses. One was a Haflinger pony. It was a little bugger.
Aren't they all? Haflingers are. They're so spirited, aren't they? They've got a big personality of their own, and they do their thing and their thing only.
Well, because they didn't do a great deal of turnout there, and the only turnout was in the summer, because you have to bear in mind that in the winter, it was 6 foot of snow outside. Oh. So, the whole thing it was like an avenue of boxes, and within this building, the indoor school came off it, the hay shed and all the straw came off it, the veterinary place came off it, the tack room came off it. It was all one massive under a cover unit. But in the summer, they could get turned out into their individual paddocks, and they could have time out, which for the horses, they were very small paddocks, but it was great. It was good. So I went from a Haflinger within my care to Brabant horse, who was a very young Brabant 4-year-old, up to a Prix Saint-Georges. And can't remember what the breed was, but he had really curly ears and they used to touch. He was a beautiful horse.
Oh, wow.
And for the life of me, I can't know what breed he is. But that Haflinger, when he knew he was going to get turned out, oh my God, he knew if he was going to get ridden, he knew if he was going to go and get washed, he just knew if he was going to get clipped, he would come out to his stable in his head collar, and he knew, I don't know how he knew, but when he knew he was getting turned out, the second you opened the door, you water skied down the whole alleyway. You came to a screeching right-hand turn. If you were still hanging on to him, and he knew which his paddock was, and he just took you there. Wow. And in the end, I just used to take his head collar off and open the door and say, "Go on, then you know where you're going." And he would just take himself to his paddock. That's how reinforcing that turnout was for him. And I've never particularly liked the breed since. However, I have, over these years of training horses, trained 3 or 4 Haflingers from trauma cases, equally starting 2 young ones, and they were delightful. Just goes to show you can't get poison to a breed just because of one horse. I now know that the management and the welfare was lacking. I now know, I understand now, but not in those days, I didn't. I gained greatly from my time in Vienna. When I came back to the UK, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just went on to an agency, and I got a job in Gloucestershire preparing yearlings for racing. And again, I had no idea about welfare. Now I would never help the 2-year-old industry, not in any which way, shape or form. But in those days I did. It was a working farm. It was a dairy farm. And I ended up doing everything with the cows. And we had jerseys. They were gorgeous. And I used to do the milking and the calving and the yearlings and the breeding and the mares and the foals. And I was absolutely in my element. We used to walk hound pups to the local hunt, and they were the devil incarnate. They were just so independent. Great fun. And it was, for me, totally immersed in all these different animals. She used to get racing mares coming out of training really in trouble emotionally, and we had to settle them right down to be able to get them in foal. And they'd come with chickens or a cockerel or a goat because that was the only way they would eat. You know, they were really in a bad place, quite a lot of them. And we had to kind of get them settled down to being able to be calm and relaxed and then be able to get in foal. The hormones were all over the place. And that was then my sitting back and looking at all of this and saying, how are all these horses so damaged? And working with the herd of cows, how cohesive it is. And this hierarchy that we had with the cows, that, you know, when milking was about to come, you'd get up at 4 a.m. and open your curtains and look out. The cows would be parking their calves behind a tree or in a ditch or parking them all over. Those cows would stay there. Then all the cows would move into the gateway, always in the same order. So you had the hierarchical, dominant, whatever, cows in the front. Then you kind of had their henchmen behind them. And by the time you worked your way through, right at the back, you had the totally neurotic, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And those cows would come in that order, would go into the pens in that order. And when you opened the doors for the milking parlour, they would come in that order. And heaven help if you got the wrong cow in the wrong order. Oh my God, milking parlour would be destroyed. So it was all behaviour. And it really had a massive impact on me because up until that point in time, horses were for riding and they were to do as they were told. And you had an aim and you made the horse do it because that's what you did. And this kind of blew an awful lot of it away, especially when we had 1 or 2 damaged yearlings over the time who couldn't go to the yearling sales and they'd lost their value because they couldn't go to the high flyer sale or whatever and they had to recover. And I ended up starting them under saddle and then working them and then getting to ride. And I used to ride point-to-pointers for a local, for Dick Bainbridge down the road. So I got some riding in, but from riding dressage like Melanie S to like sitting on horse. But I discovered
the two extremes. Long legs, little short legs crouching in the saddle.
Well, I never could. My stirrups were always way longer than everybody else's. But for me, they felt like my knees were under my chin. And I had an absolute ball. And I just found this amazing passion for thoroughbreds that has gone concurrent. It still is. At the moment, I have a 12-year-old thoroughbred in who I'm retraining to be a para dressage horse for a lady who cannot use her legs. She cannot walk. They're so amazing. They're so adaptable. They're so, you know, and he's an ex-racehorse. So I have loved, I have, when I went into business, I just bought racehorses from Doncaster sales, and I found what their strengths were. I loved eventing in those days because, of course, I learnt to gallop racehorses and jump great big jumps at speed. And it was just like, oh, this is so much better than dressage. In my early day, well, right the way through, I've just always retrained racehorses. And they might end up as a family pet. It might be a mother-daughter share and never be. That's fine if that horse, that was its direction. It could have gone eventing. I did get one little horse. I have pictures of him on my wall here, who I bought out of a field with one shoe on, desperately thin. It took me 3 years to retrain. He broke my coccyx. He used to bronch and panic, and he couldn't put weight on. But oh boy, did he jump. I took him to intermediate. I sold him. A girl who became a lifelong friend after that bought him, and she produced him to advanced, and he became in the top 100, you know, sponsored by Super Solver Tax, top junior in the country, one Brahman, one Burley, you know.
Wow.
So, but what's a success? Is it a success that you find one that you can, you know, it might go team chasing, it might go, so it's lovely to have one that then she kept him for life, and that made this glory thing. Oh, is it a success that become a family pet that was loved by everybody and tolerate, have kids on it, and that? There is no mark of success. It's about channeling that one individual horse in the direction that it found pleasure from, and it always looked out for the way that life can be a pleasure for that horse, not what I think it should be doing, and making it. Always going within the strengths of the animal, always being guided by calmness and knowing that the horse feels safe, and a horse that will, if I put 50% in, I'd love that horse to volunteer 50% too. We meet in the middle. Rather than, you know, walk on. I'd like to say, walk on. He goes, yeah, how much walk on would you like? You know, so digressing slightly, but anyway, that's
all part of the journey. Yeah. And just to tap into one of the points you mentioned there, Melanie, about the racehorse becoming a para dressage, did you say? A para dressage horse? How easily adaptable are they? Because we often hear about the difficulties retraining them, and about their speed, and about their urge to go. You know, how adaptable are they when it comes to retraining, and how long does it take to give them a new job and say, no, you're not a racehorse?
It is very much an individual one. So this particular little horse, Indy, he was a racehorse in training to 3, got injured. They wanted to bring him back in at 4. The old couple who owned him said, no, you're not going to do that. You've hurt our horse. And they took him away, which is not normal, because they want them out racing, and they, you know, and he lived in a field for 8 years.
Wow.
So he lived in a field for 8 years, and this old couple looked after him, and so he didn't have company or anything, so that was what they did, and they looked after him, and nothing bad happened to him, and they just didn't want anything to happen to him because he'd been hurt, but he was their horse, and they didn't want him to go back into racing because the trainer had hurt their horse. And so when they did get, obviously one of them got ill, and then looking after the horse became very difficult. It ended up going to a racehorse rehabilitation place, which is where Kit found him, and we spent a long time. They had brought him back into work in a very limited way, and found him to be really amiable and kind. Most para riders, dressage riders, are riding retired dressage horses that have got right up to there, and then they can't do that anymore, and they downgrade them. But they're already really produced. So to actually take this racehorse, who'd had his only experience of work or ridden life was racing, to be then turned away for 8 years, and not going into stables or anything, to then going to this place where they kind of got him going, to then Kit saying, okay, I'd like to take him on, and him coming to us, you know, first put him in a stable. Oh my God, he was just coming out of the stable door, separation anxiety, and we just took our time. He's been a year now with us, and Kit, I have every admiration for her because she just is giving him the time to be what he's going to be. And it's taken this time to get a horse at that age who hasn't been in work to become strong, become flexible without pressuring him, forcing him into outlines. Far from it. It's very easy to start forcing them into outlines, but then all they do is go below the vertical and then they're tight. And we never wanted that because Kit hasn't got enough control to be doing, he has to meet her and try. And she has to tie her legs on. I mean, para riders strap themselves onto a saddle. You know, how many of us would tie ourselves onto a horse? I have learned so much from Kit. And this little horse is amazing. And the slowness that we've been able to, and the permission that I've had to be slow, because so many people, time is money and all that. And I'm ever so cautious. How long is it going to take? It's going to take as long as it takes for your horse to feel safe. And for us to be able to generalize the training and be able to move it into, because it's all evidence-based. All my training is evidence-based. It's that one horse in front of me at that one moment in time and what we can do to be able to raise thresholds, bring out inquisitive, gregarious, bring out all this stuff that might have been very suppressed because of fear and flight and rage and all this, the story. And when she does get on him, and she's been very poorly, so I've been actually riding him a lot over the night. I think she hasn't sat on him for 6 months. She has been very poorly, but she's always there to support me. Always. She takes an active interest in everything I'm doing. And she's loving his journey. We're now taking him indoors once a week. So we're starting to, and he's just, and I've only just started transitioning into canter. We've had him a year.
Brilliant.
Because to build his frame up for the injuries that he had, and 8 years out of work is a lifetime. So it's going to take a long time to and sort his feet out and his core and his ligaments and his brain and everything. And she's marvellous. She's marvellous. I have the greatest respect for her. And she actually got on him yesterday for the first time in a long time.
Oh, wow.
And she's got on him when she wasn't really good to, because she's in so much pain at the moment. But she's facing an operation. She said, I just want to ride him before, but I can't ride him again for ages. And she has to haul herself on, and he has to just stand. And she gets her leg and she throws it on his back, and she says, leg, and bit by bit, leg, and she moves, leg. So she tells him every stage of the way what she's doing. And she'll get herself at the stage of coming off. She'll bring her body over, but her legs won't come. So she'll be in a really precarious, dangerous situation. And she'll say, Indy, leg, 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 Indy, wait, leg. And she's getting the leg off until she can sit back down on the mounting block. And he's like, yeah, okay. He's amazing. So I love racehorses because they've just ex-racehorses. They understand the trauma. I understand conditioning. I understand associative learning. I understand learned behaviours. I understand all of this. I understand classical conditioning. I understand behaviour modifications. So I'm so lucky because I've got all these tools to be able to help racehorses have a wonderful new career in whatever direction they want to go in. And I do have to say that comes from that time ago of those broodmares coming in with a goat. And yet she had to go to Ireland to be covered. Well, the goat go with her. So I had to teach her that she's okay on her own. And, cockerels running around the place that come in with them, and all the things that they used in order to help these horses that live on their own. Don't forget, they used to turn them out in those days. They aren't more now.
Is it that the goat would go in the stable with them? It was a small companion.
Absolutely. And the goat would help the mare, provide a bit of competition over food to have the racehorses eat, because they will just go off their food.
No. Would there be... obviously there's nothing... A horse needs a herd and it needs companions that are horses, but do horses get any kind of comfort from a goat?
Yeah, because that's...
They do?
I do. Sleep with it, live with it, travel with it, come out and the races with it, left in the stable while it goes and races, comes back to it. Or a cockerel. And those cockerels will wait for them. They're ordinary, the relationships. And the cockerels will roost on them and sleep, because that's companionship, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the racehorses it has started to change without a doubt. The value of turning horses out, allowing them more movement, allowing them more freedom, maybe not in groups because they're in training and there's injury risk, but they will be next door to each other and they could mutually groom over the, but the trouble is if they've been 2-year-old racing, they've been pulled out at 18 months. So they've lost a lot of ability for social skills. So there's a lot of learning for racehorses coming out of racing. It has improved in recent years. There's no two ways about it. And there are some trainers who train their racehorses out of a field and they say they never get injured. They are strong. They don't get pulled tendons. Their feet are stronger. Their bones are stronger. Their brain is stronger. And it doesn't affect their fitness. Whereas before, they got cooped up in a stable for 23 out of every 24 hours, which was where I was with racehorses. So yeah, it has improved for them now. But still, separation anxiety is always a very big problem when racehorses come out of training and they've lost all the structure and everything that was safe and everything that was their routine. And then some lovely persons bought them and they get thrown into a field with all these other horses and they don't know what to do. And they will latch onto one for safety. And then you've got a real problem because that it's latched onto one and it can't exist without that one. And you can't separate them from that one. Or in fact, then any of them, they'll start stressing if any horse goes out the field or, and they can't take them out on their own. And so there's lots of, I actually have an article at the moment in print with Concordia. Do you know Concordia? It's great. I have a 6-page spread in Concordia talking about separation anxiety and about what you can do about it. And then there's a section at the end about racehorses too, because it's a massive subject. Not quite sure.
Endlessly fascinating. And I had to ask about the goat, and this is coming from someone who I myself have got a little herd of rescue horses, 3. We've got rescue sheep. And I know how bonded the sheep are to the horses and the horses are to the sheep. And if we move the horses further away down the land, the sheep will call for the horses and vice versa. So I know that they have amazing friendships in their herds and their flocks with each other. But of course, I've never kept just one horse with one sheep. So I wouldn't be sure whether they would get that kind of relationship and bond that a little herd of horses would get, just a horse and just a sheep. But clearly, they do bond as best friendships just as horses do.
Absolutely do. The care system, Panskep's 7 brain systems, the work he did about mapping the emotional brain, absolutely learning care, being able to mutually groom and do all sorts of things. A mare wants to stand over a youngster that is asleep and they will do that. And I mean, we had the mares, there was geldings that happened with this too. Absolutely, still the same thing. Wanted playmates, something that they can... And so when they're in training, when they come out of training, and like we have to try and separate her from the goat, she would start to get group turnout with all the other mares, and so starting to open her world up to all of this, whatever, and then coming back into her stable, and her goat would be there waiting for it. The goat we would put in with the heifer cows, so the dried off cows or the heifers, the goat would move in to live with all of them. We had 2 or 3 goats like that. It used to be hilarious. I remember this one goat, and you used to go into the heifers with your big bag of feed that you poured out along the feeder. This goat used to jump on it before I got there, and he used to headbutt any cow that dared come to get its breakfast.
Wow, they are a whole new level of fierce, aren't they? They know their own. They know their own mind and they know their own breakfast.
Boss hated them, and I is one thing I never really forgave her for. I went home on holiday for a week, which happened very often. I came back and she'd had kennels come and shoot the goat.
Oh gosh!
But by that time, she didn't need a male goat. I suppose she was a farmer. I was gutted at the goat, but he was a pillock.
Oh,
he wasn't.
Gosh,
he used to get. He used to eat all her hanging baskets. She used to spend a fortune on hanging baskets with all these. And he used to put his feet on the wall, and he would just strip them. She hated him, but the mare didn't need him anymore because the mare had everything she needed. She was going out in group turnout, making relationships with the horses. No longer in training, let down physically, let down emotionally. I do understand now why she did. But I didn't forgive her at the time. I loved that goat. But she wasn't a collector of animals that had no use. If a cow was dried off, it was not going to milk anymore, it would go. She was a farmer. And so, And the same with the mares. If the mares had spent their time, then they would go. What she would not do, and I have to kind of respect her for that, is that they never went to market and put down on the yard. The hunt would come and put them down. She never needed that 50 quid or that 100 quid or whatever they could have earned if they'd gone to Gloucester Market. So fair play to her. It was a business. It's not what I could do, but I understood. I do understand now. I didn't understand then, but I do now. But she just never wanted anything bad to happen to them. And so the kennels would come and shoot them and they wouldn't know anything about it. And in actual fact, I kind of wish more racehorse trainers would do that than sending these, if they're burnt out, they're damaged, they end up running for their lives in Belgium, or they end up at some grotty horse sale, going for slaughter, going for meat, some unsuspecting person buying an absolutely hugely damaged racehorse, not knowing what to do with it, and this downward spiral that happens to so many of them. I wish more racehorse trainers would put them down at the yards and never let them leave their care, because the life, I mean, you know, it is better now than it was, because now we have rehabilitation of racehorses. We have more, they're even encouraged at the owners to save some money along the way to help pay for their horse to be retrained, to have a life outside of racing. So without a doubt, I'm painting a kind of black picture, but even 10 years ago, that was it. But now we have raw classes, and there is much more attention to the fact that they could have a really good life outside of racing. But buying an ex-racehorse from York Sales at 120 quid for some mother and father to buy the daughter's horse because they could afford it and it's beautiful, and no idea what they're doing because they have no value, you know. So yeah, it's one of those difficult subjects to talk about, because
an ethical dilemma, isn't it?
It is. It really is an ethical dilemma. But when you see how dreadful life ends up being when these animals, who are so complicated, end up going down the dealer routes, it's horrendous. It is horrendous. And so I would support, sometimes it's the owners, these, because they don't know, I want 500 quid for it, send it to sale, because they've got no emotional, syndicates. They're just businessmen and that just own this leg of a racehorse and it's supposed to win races. So they're not involved in the animal in any kind of in fact, they don't even see it as an animal. And that will always happen. You'll always have the banker and the nurse. You'll always have the person who's in it for money and the person who's in it for care. You're always going to have that in life with everybody. But with racehorses, of course, that does happen quite a lot. Anyway, there you go. That's my
your route into horses and the lessons that you learned along the way, Melanie. And now I've got to put another question to you, and it's a question that we all, as horse owners and horse trainers and horse instructors, I think we all contemplate this at some point in our journey with horses. Can we speak horse as a human?
No.
And why not, do you think, Melanie?
Because a horse is a horse and a human is a human. It's as simple as that. And your horse is never going to look at you in any other way than being a human. What the horse wants to do is be able to look at you as being a safe place. That's all. That all of us want to feel safe. All of us. At home, you drive a car that you feel safe driving. Nothing worse than getting into a car that you feel the car is unsafe, or getting in as a passenger and you think that the driver who's driving the car is unsafe. You have a front door and you lock it and you're safe in your own home. If you ever have your house burgled, emotionally, that can be a terrible thing to happen to you, because suddenly you might just not feel safe within your own four walls. So the feeling of needing to be safe and wanting to feel safe is innately in all of us. We want to feel safe with our friends. We want to hope that our friends are going to keep our counsel, and that your husband is going to be faithful. That, because trust is the hardest thing to earn and the easiest thing to lose, and can be lost in an instant.
How do we make our horses feel safe, Melanie? Whether it's in the field or the arena or the indoor school.
By never being brutal for a kickoff, by making sure you've got good support. I mean, and everybody's at different levels and all the rest of it. I moved into my journey from then starting my business in 1985 here and doing everything I already knew from VHS and Vienna and everything, and then learning natural horsemanship, and then moving into behavioural science because I became involved with zoos and saw what they were doing with zoo animals. And it's like, my God, you know, how can you teach a tiger to come out of a pen, just come and lie down and let you stick needles in it and draw blood? And you're not even in with it. You're behind bars, and elephants, they give you their foot and you can do things with them. Voluntary participation in their own care, and the training being really enriching, and these animals wanting to come and do. It's like, well, we're doing this with horses. So I have obviously immersed myself in behavioural science over the last 15 years and learned from some of the world's best, Ken Ramirez, Susan Friedman, all of these amazing people, you know, and they might be bird specialists or this, that, and it doesn't matter. Behavior is behavior. And then applying it with horses. So the one thing that I have become, and again, I had that intuitive base. I've always had that intuitive base. And we all have that in us. Everyone. If you own a dog, you'd have to be a vet for you to look at your dog and go, oh, what's wrong with you? Oh, there's something wrong. What's wrong? You know, come on, have your breakfast. Why? And then you're going to start investigating your dog. Nobody trained you to do that. That innate thing about the animal in front of you that you love, and you have routine things with it, and you have expectations in behavior. You have all of that, and then suddenly you just see something that's not right, and you either ignore it or you go, oh, that's not right. But you're not a vet, you know. But you know that animal, and they don't lie. Animals don't have that language to manipulate you, and they have avoidance behaviours. Of course they do. Got loads of avoidance behaviours, but in a normal, care, safe, you know, getting up for your breakfast or anything else, and your dog's still asleep and that. And then you'll investigate that, won't you? What's wrong with you? And then you kind of follow it outside, and then you go and have a look and see if his poo's normal, and if it's not, has he got diarrhea? Has he got? But you're starting to investigate your pet because you know them, and the horses are no different. You get to know your horse, and you get, hopefully, if you've got a nice horse or bred a nice horse, everything's been hunky dory. When you get a change of behaviour, you go, oh, you know, instead of saying, oh, he's being naughty, hit it, which is kind of, you know, what everyone says. So why is he doing that? What's wrong? What's wrong? Is it pain? Is it, you know, what's wrong? Is saddle not fitting? Is he a dentist? Does it pain? Do I need a vet? And we start investigating stuff. So yes, by really truly understanding behavioural science and applied behavioural science and behavioural analysis, and it's desperately complicated if I want it to become a complicated antecedent behaviour and consequence and everything. But at the end of the day, unexpected adverse behaviour, there's a reason. Of course there's a reason. Always has a reason. And only the other day I had a phone call from a teenager, and she said, oh my God, my mare's such a bitch. I'm sick of it. And I said, oh, it's a bitch. Good. What does being a bitch look like? And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, what's she doing? Well, she's being really awkward. What does awkward look like? By the time I'd finished with her and got rid of those labels, she had started to describe observable behaviour. And then we were able to take the observable behaviour contingent with the environment and any environmental or management changes. And it could be the introduction of a new horse or a horse missing. It could be weather. It could be with this mare. It could be to do with cycling. I don't mean on a bike, cycling.
We're with you, Melanie. Don't worry.
I'm so glad.
Out for a bike ride.
And so could you imagine? Yeah, that horse has just gone off on a cycle. So then, by the time I'd finished with her, this teenager who was stroppy suddenly was observing behaviour. And then she said, well, what do you think your horse gains from doing that? Well, she doesn't want to do something. So I said, it's avoidance behaviour. Is she stopping you? Or is she saying, I can't face that environment? Is it you? What are you doing that she can't interact with? And, you know, and then you start looking at everything and going into all this analysis. By the time she'd finished, or I'd finished with this young girl, oh, she was so on board. And she was like, oh my God, I don't know how I missed that. I was just listening to everybody else who was saying that, hit her, make her do it. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do.
How terrifying that hits her is still
Always.
the words that come out of some equestrians' lips or some people's lips, you know, absolutely despicable.
Look at Charlotte. Like,
yeah.
And she was not in temper doing that. She was calm, thrashing that horse, calm. That is a practiced art, which is something she's learned, something she feels she has permission to do. It is endemic and entrenched when we are using horses at high level, when money is involved. Money becomes, and the winning and the trophy comes before the welfare. We know that with Saint Boy. And Saint Boy at the Olympics last year has opened up a huge can of worms, because everything's changed since Saint Boy and the treatment that he got from that German rider. Because she just had to jump. If she jumped clear, she'd have won gold. So, I mean, she was in gold position, but that horse couldn't go. And then the trainer punches it all on television. So now the social license to operate is a massive thing the public is watching. We need to take a big old step back. So horses...
And also interesting, just picking up on that we can't speak horse. We're not a horse. We're not part of the herd.
No.
What do they see us as, Melanie, as we stand with them, as we groom them, as we work with them? What do they see us?
In a perfect world, they see you, that you add value to their life, that they want to spend time with us, that you are a elicitor of scratches and just there. Go on, oh, go on. So you are bringing them pleasure, that you are, they want to spend time with us because they feel safe, and they'll meet us halfway. You know, we'll say, can you do this? Oh, I'm not sure, but oh, go on then. Yay, what a good girl. That was a try. Well done. You have to do the whole thing. You just went, yay, that was a try. You give her a pony note or a scratch and that. And they go, oh, yeah, actually, I don't need to be so scared of that because you're not. So relationship, we have this amazing thing with horses that horses really do give us. You know, it's why they're in facilitated structure for helping people with trauma and all the rest of it, because they will bring to the table a huge heart and they will mirror us. And if we're bristly, they will be alert and on edge. And if we can't control our temper, those horses would rather be in the field. And if we are happy and calm, these wonderful studies of these pictures of people with different emotions. So somebody smiling and somebody angry and somebody shouting and somebody crying. And this study that they've done it several times now with horses, and how the horses are attracted to the person who's crying. Because they actually want to nurture. And the person who's happy, because they're a safe place to be. They understand emotions. They understand and how they avoided angry and shouting pictures. Oh, horses are gone. So we don't give them credit for just how much they pick up on. And I wish we did, because the nuances, when you break it all down, are very, very fine. We don't understand calming signals, even micro calming signals. So the little signals before you've even got the calming signals. Unless somebody's tutored you and taught you all of these things, what you end up is with a behaviour. She's just being a bitch, she won't go out. Actually, she told you 10 minutes ago. She started to tell you that her fear was raising. Cortisol and adrenaline are starting to come, and that she's really worried. And so then you'd have to look at that environment and think, okay, does she fear leaving the other horses? Is she fearful of going? How many horses go out reluctantly and come back at 90 miles an hour because they're avoiding going out and they're escaping it, coming back to where they feel safe? So knowing how safety and our right to personal autonomy is the same for your horses. They have the right to live a life that is worth living. They have a right to feel safe with us. And they have a right to autonomy. They are allowed to have a voice. If they don't have a voice, we can't help them. So horses that are in learned helplessness and who are suppressed, depressed, all of those ones who are internalizing and just daren't lift their head above the parapet because of how training and experiences has been, the opposite of imploding is exploding. We just want the bit in the middle where they go, oh, I'm not really sure, but oh, maybe it's okay because you're there. And you go, yay, that's all right. And they go, oh, yeah, okay. And then they're trying and we're together and it's just such a pleasure. Even though you might want that, you might want to jump a 6-foot wall, but actually you have to start with a pole on the ground. My sister's journey with ballet from, charging around, just leaping about and doing her stuff in little things to eventually being on point. What's the ballerinas on point? How many years does it take them to learn that strength, that balance, that poise, to be able to stand all your weight, leap from one foot onto another in a graceful way?
Yeah.
Point. So if it takes us those many years to be able to go from almost a child in a nappy who needs a lot of ground room to a ballerina who can balance on point, there's your horse from being a young horse needing wide reins and allowed to find its own balance to eventually becoming a horse that can have collection and that can offer it and can bascule over huge fences, or who can produce fantastic dressage, or, the same journey, the same time, the same effort, the same allowing each, the human to ballet, the horse to dressage, giving it the time to strengthen. The dressage certainly has to get rid of the 10 marks for submission. Why should a horse have to submit to the aids? How do you get scored on that horse submitting? I refused when I got married to have a bay I'm going to obey my husband. What am I going to obey him for? This is
a horrendous line.
Yeah, this is the partnership. But obey is what was there. And do horses really have to obey us? So dressage has got to get rid of submission. They've got to bring in partnership. They've got to bring in the 50-50. Are you working as a coalesced team? Is the horse offering? You are giving, you're asking, and the horse is going, yes, I can do this with you and for you, not because of you. And yeah, eyes are on them now. The FEI is under a huge, it's kicking and screaming at it there. But I am a affiliated, endorsed trainer for the World Bitless Association. And the World Bitless Association, oh my word, what they're doing behind the scenes, pressuring, all backed up by science. Everything is backed up, evidence-based. We should be able to have bitless dressage. And horses can still go in cadence and self-carriage without a bit in its mouth. It doesn't have to have spurs on its side, because we can produce walk on. And I could say to you, stand up, it's a cue. And then I could say sit. And you get it. You understand cue. So you've learnt that, hopefully without somebody either dragging you by your hair to make you stand up or forcing you down to sit. We can train the horses the same. If it's all done through repetition and positive reinforcement and it's all good. And when you say you're ready, can you stand up? They go, yay, how much would you like me to stand up for? How long would you like me to stand up for? Because it's been done with positive reinforcement. So, yeah, the world is changing. And I'm seeing a great deal of lots and lots of interest in wanting horses started in positive reinforcement. Sadly, don't seem to be any yards in the entire. I've been the first, and I can't be the last because the youngsters are coming up. Where you can send your horse in for training. So there's loads of behaviour experts and people who will come to you and they'll work with you for an hour or 2 hours. And they go, but where can you send your horse for behaviour modification, for trauma? So I get a lot of vet referral work for horses with extreme behaviour. Gone to the vets because they're bolting and they've had full pain markup and it hasn't got kissing spine, or it has got kissing spine and it's all been treated, but the horse has learned behaviours. So then they refer them to me.
And Melanie, before I ask you to share your details for those who want to find out more about you and your work, before you go, just imagine jumping into years and years ahead from now, jumping into the future. What do you hope horses' lives will be like in 10, 20, 30 years' time compared to the equestrian world that they live in now?
Education is key. Absolutely key. Animal trainers, dog trainers, going into colleges and universities like Bishop Burton College and all the rest of it. Dogs Trust, working for shelters, everything now, zookeepers, zoo training. It's all about positive reinforcement. All the dogs that are sniffing out cadavers and drugs and saving the lives of soldiers in Iraq and all the rest of it. All positive reinforcement. And right next door to the animal trainers, the horse department, where all of our kids are going and they're doing horse management and this, that and the other. It is still using twitches and they don't touch on it because the staff don't understand. And unless we can, from the education side up, I can go in there and guest lecture and they think it's something novel. And yet every one of those students want to be trained with positive reinforcement. You know, we're not allowed to like whip our kids or throw chalkboards at them anymore in school or stand them in a corner and make them feel a fool. We don't train like that. So we're training us in exactly the way, encouraging repetition and, you know, understanding weaknesses, helping them build up on the weakness and giving them clarity and moving them on. And that's exactly what we should be doing with horses. And unless every single college and university in the UK changes to 100% ethical, evidence-based, science-based protocols, nothing will change. It'll be odd people. It will change, and it is changing, but so slowly, because our kids are still being taught kick it, hit it, pull it, twitch it, stop it, you know, because it's being a bitch and it won't let me clip its legs and I'm the lecturer and I need it to have its legs, and put a twitch on it. So unless it is changed from the educational level upwards, and yet you go next door, just walk 50 yards across that car park and go to the animal trainers, yeah, who are all being taught behavioural science in order to have a career working with zoo animals. And it can be dogs who are going to be seeking dogs. It can be protection dogs. It can be, you know, Dogs Trust, working with trauma dogs. It could be that you're going to be a self-employed, even a groomer. You know, we shouldn't be hanging dogs by their necks and forcing them to be groomed now. The groomers, we should have the dogs want to come in and have their toenails done, not putting muzzles on them. And, you know, so it is changing in every direction, just so slowly with the horses, because it is not being taught as basic education. And that is my biggest, I mean, I am not a popular person.
The horse world is behind the animal care world, or the animal behaviour world, as it were.
Absolutely. Oscar and Brian at York are actually quite forward thinking about a lot of it. But if you're at college and you've got all these students, these horses that are in college, they've got 2, 3 or 4 lessons a day. And so they have to tolerate all sorts of different levels of riders and maybe ill-fitting tack and all the rest of it. And then somebody else will walk in just when they're resting and recovering and want to put bandages on them, and then something else. If all animals were given full sentience, say, in the government, oh my God, everything would change. Everything would change. Farming, everything would change. Full sentiency, that is where, in law, we agree that all animals can feel pain, can suffer emotional harm, that they have a right to, you know, we've got the 5 freedoms, which now moved on to the 5 domains, which is used in farming, but guess what? Not in horses. Every horse should have the right to be able to behave or display natural behaviours. And you go around all these livery yards, and if they get turned out at all, they go into individual paddocks. You know, but horses need horses. Horses need friends, freedom, and forage. They're very simple. That's what a horse needs. You can't turn a stallion out with, you're always going to have a rig, or you're going to have a horse like some of these racehorses that have literally don't know how to make, always going to get the odd horse who's socially, always going to get the odd person who is socially unable to, and you'd think we're all born on an equal platform, but genetics, treatment and environment poisons some children and they end up in a really bad way, just the same as animals, same as dogs, same as horses. So you're always going to have the odd one who just cannot live with other horses, and it will resource guard and it will attack, and it will, because it doesn't know what else to do. You'll always have a little boy in the school who's going to ping you with his bloody pea shooter and bully and have his little henchmen around. We're always going to have, obviously. However, there's always a reason behind all that behaviour with children, and there's a reason behind those horses. But there are some horses who can't live with other horses, but they need to live next door. But the majority of horses who are living in single fields should have all those fences taken away and let them all live in a herd. So yeah, my thing is, unless we teach our kids leaving school, going to college at 17, to start the very basic apprenticeships, the very basic animal management, horse management, all the way through to the degree lot. They touch on some of it, but sadly, because it's not there, the lecturers are not, they don't understand it, they can't do it. They just think you get a clicker and you tick and you throw out a treat and that's it, that's clicker training. Got to be that easy. And it obviously isn't. So
a lot of change has got to happen
from the grassroots
in the next decade, from the grassroots level. Melanie, thank you so much for coming on Curious Equestrian. Please share with us how we can find more details about you and your work for those listening who might think, oh, I need to have a word with Melanie about my horse.
Oh, do you know, it's honestly my favourite thing. It's my favourite thing in talking to people. So obviously over the last 15 years or whatever, I have become a behaviour expert. It is not a one-way thing. It is not all about the horse. If I have a traumatized horse, I have a traumatized owner. Supporting owners, helping owners to understand. It's all about my being able to invest in people in order for them to be able to invest in their horse. So I am a behaviour consultant. I run online consultancy. I have people in Austria and in Bognor Regis. Did one last week with a guy in Costa Rica, somebody else in Australia. I have to do my consult at 7 a.m. with Australia because it's 9 o'clock at night with them, and which is fine. So I do have this consultancy side where we absolutely delve into the analysis side, so I get a really clear picture of what's happening and why, and historically and environment and all of that, and then always be able to start to give them a way forward. I love the consultancy side. I love going out, seeing people. I will do yard visits up north around here. I do go down to Leicester and places like that. In-house, I am a positive trainer. My staff are amazing. I have invested massively in them. And of course, my staff are lovely, lovely people. All my liveries are lovely people. They are, because they've come onto my yard. It's such a high welfare yard. I take training horses in. At the moment, I have a horse from Wakefield. I have a horse from Milton Keynes. I have a horse coming in from the west coast of Scotland. I have another horse in from Wetherby. I have horses come from all over the country to me, and after was Devon, Oxford, all sorts of, one coming up from down south, because there are no other yards where you can send your horse to be able to change your horse on the emotional level. There's me, and there will be more. There will be. I'm actively pursuing, helping youngsters coming up through all of this. You know, come on, I'm going to retire. I'm 61. I'm not retiring yet. My website is Instinctive Horse Training. On Facebook, I have 2 pages because people will go, I don't quite know how it happened, but Melanie S. Watson, 40 years in this business, is kind of my main page. I also do Instinctive Horse Training, and I kind of double up what I put on. I have a YouTube site, and that's Melanie S. Watson. And the reason Melanie S. Watson, because my middle name is Susan, came about was when I first realised that you had to brand yourself, because you never branded yourself before. Instinctive Horse Training, because intuitive, instinctive, that's kind of really my thing, which was a long time ago. I wanted to do a YouTube channel, but I found that Melanie Watson was a pole dancer. So I had to, if anyone was going to go on YouTube and look for Melanie Watson, well, I can't get my leg up there. I can tell you that right now. So that's why it was Melanie S. Watson. What you're seeing with all of my videos, I'll tell you right now, is training as it's happening, with a very honest review of the horse, what it's in for, why it's in for, and you see warts and all. So you see where it's not working because the horse will, whatever the environment changes, it is, but you will watch over a series of weeks that horse is in with me, its journey. And then I get a lot of consultancy from that because people are seeing this training happening and they're like, that's my horse. Oh my God. And I've been doing that. But look at that horse there. That came in, wanted to kill her. And now look at it. It's like 10 days later and the horse is like going, hey, Melanie, I love you. Can I come and do stuff with you? Positive reinforcement training is just so, I know it's only part of it with systematic desensitizing, counter conditioning and all of that stuff. I make it very simple for owners. They don't have to learn posh sciencey terms. Just know that I know it and I know what I'm doing.
Melanie, thank you. We will seek you out. We will seek you out across social media. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Did you guess that I'm passionate about all this? I've loved it. Bless you, Louis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram @Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.